Thank you so much. That was a great effort. So, just for the sake of everyone's knowledge, it's a Yoruba name from Nigeria. It's Oluwaseun. So, the sh. When you think about sizzling oil, right, the sh sound. So, Oluwaseun Ayodeji Oshowabi. Thank you. All right, all right. I hope we're all excited for the next session. We have a powerhouse joining us on this session. I'm incredibly honored to be having a conversation with her today. She is a global leader. She has taken a local perspective from Nigeria regionally and also to the global stage. She is a former Minister of Education in Nigeria. She was also the Vice President of World Bank, focusing on the Africa program of the World Bank. She's a mother of amazing boys and a daughter, which I am one of them. I am adopted by her, so I'm really honored and privileged to welcome my mom on the stage, Dr. Obiageli Katryn Ezekwesili.
What a pleasure. Do I have a mic?
Yes, you do.
Madam Chief Justice, my goodness, you are such an inspiration. What a pleasure.
Great. Welcome. Welcome. Excited to be chatting with you.
Yes.
It feels like a conversation.
So what
we
are
have
we going
on
to
the
be
phone.
talking about, Shil?
So we're talking about governance, justice, and education.
Yes.
And some may wonder, what is the interlink between these three components? When you look at governance, it's the crux of every nation. And it influences the policies that we have. It influences the human rights approaches that are adopted at the state level, national level, or regional levels. And it also undermines justice in some way when you don't get the governance right. So we want to look at the interlink or the intersection between all those three issues. And I want to start off because I know you've won so many arts, right? Governance, politics, governance in economic sector, education, and so many other sectors like the School of Politics, Policy, and Governance that you currently are the founder. As a leader who has served in different capacities, what are we doing right in terms of our African governance structure? What is going right, and what should we be doing differently? Are there case studies from other African countries or global economies that we should be adopting if they work for our context? What is your perspective about
that? That could be a dissertation. First, I just really want to applaud these fierce young women of Africa. Please help me to clap for them. I was saying to my sisters that really the handover has happened, right? The handover has happened. The world is your oyster. The stage of the continent belongs to you. I mean, we can look at you all and say, tomorrow will be all right. And this is not said in any patronizing way, because I have no place in my bone to call a spade an agricultural implement. A spade is a spade is a spade any time of the day. And so when I look at all of you in this fierce knowledge, in this capacity, this fire in your belly, I feel very excited about tomorrow. And I start by telling you that I am very analytical about the issues of life. I'm a very deep Christian. I believe very much in the Almighty.
Check her out on Twitter, though.
Yes, I totally believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. And yet, I'm very analytical in framing the world. So what I do say is that there are three game changers for our continent: the young people, the women, and technology. These three game changers are totally going to make Africa own the 21st century. And I'm looking at 1/3 of my three game changers. You are a nucleus of that. And I am so excited to be in your midst. Thank you very much for being you. On the question of governance, I'm sure you know that in the world of development, it's been identified analytically that Africa's poor governance is the greatest obstacle to Africa's growth and development. Poor governance. And that whatever else you may want to do about the continent, you have to sort out, you have to sort out the mess that is governance on our continent. The massive mess is epitomized in the failure of the continent to convert all its endowments, whether they be human, they be natural resources endowment, they be increasingly Africa's huge demographic of young people, the inability to convert all of the factors that can ensure growth is the governance gap. And that governance gap shows up in the form of wobbly democracies, democracy in name alone. What a research that I did in 2019 calls monopoly democracies. That is, democracies that are aberrations, because a democracy ought not to be monopolistic in any form. And why is it a monopoly democracy? It is a monopoly democracy because the supply side of your democracy, being your politicians, end up hijacking the space of democracy. And with no consequences for bad behavior, the repeat pattern of entrenched bad behavior means that decision-making, which is at the heart of governance. Governance is about public decision-making towards the improvement of society, that the quality of life of the people of any society should increasingly improve because of the quality of public decision that is being made. One of the things we have seen around the world is that you can actually see 3 boxes into which the factors that drive growth and development of society can be put. And number 1, the soundness of policies. Soundness of policies. We've been discussing a lot about issues around the justice sector. We've been discussing issues about health and its intersection with the justice system. We've talked about the legal rights. All of these things are sectors. Education sector, health sector, macroeconomic issues around monetary and fiscal policies. These are important things that can determine the quality of growth and development of society. So quality, the soundness of your policies make a big difference as to whether you grow or you don't grow, as to whether you develop or you don't develop. Number 2 box, institutions. The dynamism of your institutions anchored on the rule of law, which often is determined by the kind of constitution that you have been able to shape for yourselves. So, Madam Chief Justice, an important part of your being today is that finally the Kenyan Constitution got some things right about the appointment of justices in your country. Am I correct? That was a major milestone. The fact that the Constitution basically looked at the judiciary and said, this is such an important part of nation building. And if we can get the institution of the judiciary to be independent, to be credible, what would happen is that we would send signals to citizens as well as the rest of the world that Kenya is an environment that respects the rule of law. And that the maxim that no man or woman is above the law, the fact that you can build systems around credible, consistent signaling that there would be sanctions for bad behavior and that the society would reward good behavior when it happens, that is such an important element in governance. And then the 3rd box the quality of prioritization in the delivery of basic goods and services that both the citizens as well as businesses need in order to thrive. The whole world is a world where two economic problems are constantly being solved by countries that understand the problem of productivity and the problem of competitiveness. So any society that gets it right would invest in human capital, the human development, education, and every knowledge accumulation process to ensure that the citizens, they would invest in critical infrastructure to reduce the cost of doing anything for their people, for their businesses. They would invest in the right kinds of amenities and the software, the hardware of infrastructure, basic services delivery. So you can see these three boxes. These constitute what you should be looking out for. If you're thinking of Kenya and you're saying, what are the things that I would be saying? How sound are our policies? Economic, human development policies, trade policies, agriculture policies. How sound are they? Are they determined by empirical analysis of what works and what does not work? And I hope that our policies are not hijacked by a certain segment of society because they have access, therefore they can empower. So they hijack it to suit themselves. Every time that a segment of society can hijack the policies of that society, the public good will not be served. And so you look at that, you look at the soundness of policies, you look at the quality of your institutions, the dynamism, the fact that they are anchored on the rule of law, you look at the way that prioritization of your budget is going. You can't be saying we want to build a vibrant Kenya where everybody has the right to thrive. The women can do businesses and they can thrive. And yet, everything that has to do with access to possibilities for women works against them. So if you got all of that right, then you would say, governance is going in the right direction. Across our continent, unfortunately, it's not the story. In fact, the indicator or the index that would measure for you whether governance is going well or not going well in totality would be at least, looking at the things that the Human Development Index of HDI of the UN measures. Is your income per capita growing or declining annually? Is your life expectancy increasing or reducing? How about school enrollment and number of years that children spend in school? And increasingly now, a measure of that has to be whether the children are actually learning when they are in school. Because current data says to us that 9 out of every 10 African children in early grades do not achieve minimum proficiency level in literacy and numeracy. So you look at all of these things, you look at these indicators, and you can see that on the HDI of the UNDP, majority of the African countries are in the lower percentile. So it shows you that we have a huge governance problem. Now, are there examples of things that have worked? Oh my goodness, one thing that has worked is what we celebrate Kenya for. In fact, one thing that I had to, I did, as we say in Nigeria, shakara, for the rest of my colleagues at the World Bank in those days. And what was this? Kenya was very, very good. And God bless the soul of that permanent secretary in your technology ministry. You all know him, Dr. He was at the center of ICT revolution in your country. That is him. He is the one. That's him. That's he. The work that he did was incredible. Public sector soundness of policy, right?
Yeah.
So guess what I was showing off on behalf of the Kenyan people as VP at the World Bank? The M-Pesa.
Yeah.
It was Kenya using technology as a basis to show the world that Africa can innovate. The incredible mobility of that idea was done well by government in Africa. That's a good example. Another example would be the fact that governance is not complete if it is not inclusive. And so when you look at the fact that now that Rwanda tops the table in terms of number of women in parliament, compared with all the rest of the world, sometimes at 62%, sometimes at 61%, but above the 50-50 parity level. More women sitting in parliament than men in a country on the continent. Goodness me, that's an evidence of quality in governance at that level. So there are pockets of these things that go well. There are some of the countries where we see budget transparency. That's an evidence of good governance. There are some of the parts of the continent, where we see a transparency in public procurement. That's evidence of good governance. But it is too tentative, too fragile, too too unsystematic, so too opportunistic, completely determined by the capriciousness of those that are in office. We don't want that. We want governance that is good on a steady basis so that we can clearly accelerate in growth and development. We can claim the 21st century if we did that.
Fantastic. I can see pens moving. A round of applause for her, please. Fantastic nuggets. I hope our current leaders and future leaders are taking notes, and these are things we can take forward. I wish I had so much time with you. There's so much to unpack from what you said previously. But I'm hoping the politics panel can, take off some of the things you said and expand on it more. But I want to touch base on three things you mentioned: democracy, quality of institutions, and prioritization of budget. I heard on the last panel where they had mentioned they are hoping that government would announce or declare a state of emergency on GBV issues because, of course, that's justice. But look at Nigeria, right? During the pandemic, we had Office of the Citizens, like you championed, and we call it, ask or demand that the Senate Assembly declares a state of emergency on GBV issues, which was done. But unfortunately, nothing has happened past that. We haven't had, gender-sensitive budgeting. We haven't had institutionalization of the policies and the commitments that they made. And Kenya is looking forward to that happening. But I wouldn't say we have failed, but we haven't met up to expectations. So what should we do differently as Nigeria, as a country? And Kenya, who is looking up to that, what should they be looking out for? Or what should they do differently as well, so as not to make the same mistakes that we made?
So first, we must acknowledge that Kenya is making progress in terms of the push from within government, the fact that we have a reforming and a reformer judiciary under the leadership of Madam Chief Justice tells you why, when we say that it is important for there to be representation, people should not just, stop their nose at women and think that women are just talking like women, as they often say. Representation matters. It does matter. So once she got in there, issues that matter to women found their way to the top of the agenda. It's all about agenda setting. It's really all about agenda setting. So who has the kind of power dynamics to get an issue that matters to women to the highest rung of many issues that society should be addressing? we have often found out that when women show up, those issues begin to climb up in terms of prioritization. And so in the case of a question like the tough one you have posed, I think that it is no longer sufficient for us to be looking for allies in government. We have to now become our own allies. And so what it means is that we've got to conquer the kingdom of politics. Women were not interested in politics. Women would wait for politics to happen, and then they would carry delegations to go and meet a bunch of men who do not in any way understand why what you've brought to the table to discuss is an urgent issue. I heard the Chief Justice saying that they say the economy is the most important thing to be addressing. Well, what they seem to forget is that the economy is not some artificial construct. If you talk economy, then let's talk about the data around the economy. More than 70% of the people that are stuck in low productivity sectors of the economies of our continent are women. You want to keep your women, your majority human resource, eking out a living, and you're talking about economy? You think that some merchants are going to come and drop economic growth on you? No. So you better care about the issues that matter to your women. Because when you remove the barriers that stand in the way of your women and they are more productive, the economy is more productive. So we have to come to the place where we're able to use data and analysis to throw back at people and say, the conversation around giving, the opportunity for society to operate on an equality basis of bringing all that the women carry and all that the men carry and using it in a combined format to build society is not a soapy, sentimental conversation. It is a conversation that is steeped in empiricism, because we have seen it, that not one country that is at the top of the global economic league table happened by chance of only the men thriving in that society. It took the men and the women having access, equal opportunity to be the best that they could be, to thrive before society could develop. So we must conquer politics. How do we do this now? Hey, God have mercy. Considering that all about politics is rigged against the women, right? For a woman to get up and say, I want to go into politics, the first thing that happens in the home front is that brothers and sisters, husbands if there are, and friends would say, since when did you become crazy? You want to go and join those kinds of women that do politics? So already there is a stigma, and we have to remove that stigma. The way to remove that stigma is to associate politics with what happens in governance. Because you cannot have governance without politics. We have to go upstream now and not wait downstream. If you wait downstream, you're going to have a collection of men that you're going to be begging to make some concessions for you. We are going to now use our numbers, because our numbers are formidable. When we're going to use our numbers and design pathways that will take our women into politics. Because it was, I think it was Plato, yes, the philosopher, Plato, he said that those who think that politics is beneath them will, at the end of their day, be ruled by their inferiors. That's a deep statement. So we have to change that and consider politics as critical first step, because the more women that are in parliament, the more women that are in executive authority, the better the quality of decision making. And we have seen it, and it's been proven. So we do need to do that. Nigeria is at less than 4% of women in parliament. Kenya is at least close to the continental average of 25%. And many of the other, Namibia is a very good country also in terms of percentage of women in politics. I think my dear sister Pumzile, South Africa comes up also. But the rest of the continent is such very variable numbers, with the shameful number of 3% or less than 4% for Nigeria. So we've got to fix that. And the strategic way to fix that is to design in a deliberate and a very strategic way a corridor and pathway that would take your generation of women into politics. Not from the perspective of being cheerleaders of the men who are in politics, but coming to the table with all the training, with all the knowledge, with all the absolute acute knowledge of what it takes to govern spaces. And that would help us enormously. The third part of my response to that question is, I think we don't do well in analysis. We often are too anecdotal. We have to be less anecdotal. We must be storytellers. Don't get me wrong. We have to tell stories. But we must tell the stories with the data, with the evidence, with everything that persuades our storytelling in a way that is convincing. And so when you talked about the SGBV, you would see that people don't even know the data. Just the data. I have been in discussions where men were in the room, and when they saw some data around gender-based violence, their eyes popped. And I was like, why is your eye popping? Oh, because I never really thought much of this. I thought random cases of people being, I didn't realize it's a scourge. Imagine if we forced all organizations in government, all companies, to actually do a survey of the women that occupy the various spaces. Women in the judiciary, women in education, and just did a survey and said, tell us your experience on gender-based violence. The kind of data that would show up, it would push the momentum for action. We do need to just grab the attention of everybody by putting out the data, because that is critical. And then the fourth part is making sure that interventions that have worked, because some of the societies that you think has it all made, they went through the same kind of journey. But there are interventions that worked and there are interventions that did not work. So what we will do is look for the interventions that worked, and we would adapt those interventions within our own context and use them to fast track our own solutions. But key and critical is women actually recognizing the absolute power in the numbers that they have. My latest thing is I took over chair of the women political leaders in Brussels from former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Helen Clark. And one key thing that I'd like to achieve during my time as chair of the board is I really want for us to work together and set up an African women politics school, an academy for politics, policy, and governance.
Amazing.
I really want to do that, because we cannot leave this to one woman who sleeps and dreams and thinks. My passion is to go and find out why that Kenyan parliament, they don't make progress beyond, or the Nigerian parliament, they don't make progress beyond setting their salaries to be higher than that of every, the citizens can sacrifice, but we have to enjoy because we're the leaders. That's nonsense. When women lead, they see leadership as service. And what Africa is in need of? Servants.
Lost. That's a great way to end that question. Please, a round of applause for her. Thank you so much. I have a final question, and I want to apologize in advance because I'm going to take time. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. It would be a great injustice not to ask this question. When women don't have representation and policies that are not pertinent to them are not being adopted at the national level, they turn to the African continent and regional frameworks. For instance, we have the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and that's a commission that we, trust. We have the ECOWAS courts as well. I'm sure you're very familiar with the landmark case of Dorothy Njemanze, where, the institution of government violated her rights and other people. And ECOWAS ruled on that case. But guess what? Till date, government is yet to recognize or respect that judgment. How do we deal, in a continent where heads of government do not respect or respond to judgments given by regional frameworks? How can we ensure that we strengthen those institutions, like you rightly mentioned, so that if citizens are holding leaders accountable, there's also a regional framework that is doing the same. So it's a two-way approach, right? How do we strengthen that? And taking that lesson from the School of Politics, Policy, and Governance, you're shifting how institutions should be. What are the key lessons you've noted from SPPG, and how can we adopt that at the regional level?
Thank you so much. So the SPPG is a School of Politics, Policy, and Governance. I got tired of telling tone-deaf bunch of rulers, not leaders, that governance is important. I just got tired. I mean, it became a blunt instrument. When you're talking to someone who is tone-deaf and you wake up every day and you do the same thing, then you have to be examined, because it means that you've not taken a good lesson. So what I then did was, we got to fix politics, right? So I had to first do a research to analyze what was wrong with the politics of the continent, and to find a nexus between the poor economic performance of Africa and its politics, and being able to construct a model on an analytical framework through which you could understand the problem and then provide the solutions. And one of the solutions on the supply side of this triangular pillars of democracy model that I constructed is basically the existing pipeline of Africa's politics will consistently produce the kind of leaders you have right now. So it's either you're going to just be a permanent reverend sister and be praying that one day they will have mercy on you and get a Damascus experience and then change, or you would be smart enough to know that in a market space, if a pipeline has attained monopoly and is entrenched, it is difficult to change it from within. That what you have to do is to get an external shock against that pipeline. And so basically, the School of Politics, Policy, and Governance is our solution for producing a new pipeline, a massive pipeline of new leaders that are trained on curriculum that are actually solutions to existing and future problems of their country and continent. And that when you train them, you're training them for three things: for character, competence, and capacity. And that if I have sufficient pipeline of those kinds of leaders, they enter into the market space. You want to look at politics and governance. In my theoretical model, if you looked at them as products, like any other product in the market space, right? And this pipeline is a very tainted, very strange pipeline that's not serving you. If I brought a new pipeline of people like Aya, I brought people like Rose, I brought people like you into a new pipeline of new leaders, and we brought you en masse because we have actually deliberately designed a curriculum that speaks to those issues that must change. And we brought you, and there are about 100,000 of you over a period of a decade. How dare this entrenched useless pipeline try to pretend that you don't exist? Can they? So it's enough time for crying and moaning. It is time to challenge existing pipelines. All right? So, so when you design those kinds of curriculum, what would happen is that, you know, that in the SPPG curriculum, we have courses that are about ECOWAS, courses that are about Africa Union. When people are actually showing up in your political space with knowledge of these institutions, the obligations that countries have under these institutions, the role of domestication of the grand norms of these institutions, it's a different template. When you go to meet some of your parliamentarians and you're talking about some charter, they will say, hey, charter? Where did they charter it from? Which bus stop did they charter the bus from? You know, you don't want that in your politics. You want people who are well educated in statecraft. While that is going on, in the existing platform context that we have, I think that even the citizens haven't well understood the regional rights. They haven't, you know, because there's little enlightenment about the fact that as an ECOWAS citizen, there are sub-regional rights that are available to me. The public is not aware of it. So we do need, for those who know, to mobilize and to enlighten the rest of society. Because you see, there's no incentive for a country that refuses to respect its own laws to respect regional laws. It's so distant. Huh? So there are no consequences for you disrespecting your citizens in the rights that your constitution gave them. It is now because EAC said so. You say, who is EAC? They should stay there and be talking their own. You know, so we do need to understand that the domestic pressure is what will amplify into regional pressure for governments to respect existing treaties that they have signed to. And finally, I think that the African women that are in advocacy, and I speak now to your generation, there were pockets, many pockets of women. Whether, you know, I remember our big sister, Wangari, you know, in their days, you know, different pockets of women groups across the continent never talked to each other. Only always saw each other when they were abroad at the same time for certain events. But the women of Africa have come of age not to need anybody to bring them together. We need to connect all the bases that exist. You see, this idea that one cock should crow at dawn is a stupid way of looking at life. Why should one cock crow at dawn? I'm interested in seeing your generation overtake anything we have done. The time when I see a young woman who says, oh, Auntie Obi, oh, I want to be like you. I'm like, are you okay? You want to be like me? You mean you don't want us to make progress beyond me? You should be more than me. That is the basis of progress. That is the basis of progress. Where the Chief Justice is, look at my sister. You see Pumzile? You see her. She was a brilliant politician. She became deputy president of South Africa. Sometimes people forget this. Listen, if she were a man that was once deputy president, this place will still be shaking, Because His Excellency will keep his hand like this, even though he was not excellent at all in government. you know. But you see, you can say that. Your generation has to build on this. We don't need one woman greatness. No. It doesn't serve us. One cock cannot crow at dawn, and it will be good for the society. So we do need to get you all, connect all your powers, because collective power is actually much better than the individual power. Of course, it starts with the individual waking up and saying, I have agency. I have the power to do something. But don't stay at that individual level. And don't be excited about, they interviewed me on BBC, they interviewed me on CNN, and what did that do for us? So we need you to just deprogram your mind from the small island mentality. The small island mentality. You don't need it. You are the girls, the women of the world. So connect your bases and become really formidable. Aya, I am so glad that you got all your sisters from the different countries. I was even so elated when I saw you handing the gavel to Rose. My goodness, get more of you. Unlock all the little bases and networks. Build an incredible umbrella. Build a formidable continental organization, network of women, and not women who gather to moan and to mourn the fact that people are not taking us serious. Hey, they're not taking you serious. You better take yourself serious. Because the moment a woman takes herself serious, the world takes her serious.
Yes.
And a key thing that I leave with you is, if there's a core value I subscribe to, it's fearlessness. What are you afraid of? The people you're fearing are afraid of you. You did. I don't think you heard me. The people you are fearing are afraid of you. They are afraid of what you carry. And that when you unleash that thing you carry, they would have to be looked for. So stop being afraid. Fearlessness. For every one of you that has shown up, and you know that it's not about you. It can never be about you. Who are you? It has to be about society and the assignment you have for living this continent better than you met it. And so if it is about service, go into it with a lot of fearlessness, with a sense that character is the enduring currency of life. Don't be these overnight, oh yeah, we care about women, and then, oh, come and represent the women. Sister, the women are, who are the women? Which women? No, you don't want to be that. Character, consistency. Because my father said that character is not complete until it is consistent. So don't let it be that women are saying that we need to have representation only for it to end up being misrepresentation. Just because you have shifted from one angle to another angle. I totally want to end on the note that Nala at 2 has this amount of convening power. The way this girl got me into Kenya, only Aya knows how it was that I managed to come to Kenya. I bought in so many things in order to make it, but I had to. She has the capacity. You have the capacity to convene, because we can look at you and say, oh dear, our successors are here. And it's a beautiful feeling to see this level of self-awareness, the power that you individually carry, and the greatness that you will collectively do for our continent. And I wish you well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.